And the women right now in this room are not happy with that word, and I'll tell you why. Women have been relegated to mental institutions whenever they've been deemed to stand up for themselves. They've been called hysterical, dramatic, angry, over emotional. Those are trigger words for us to mean shut up. And the women right now in this room are not happy with that word, and I'll tell you why. When you say words like that, that has been used as against us.
Yes, those words have been saying to us as a women many times. My guest today is sharing how this could affect us and how women can overcome internalized barrier and truly support each other. She is the Dr. Joy Wiggins, an expert in diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging, with over 20 years of experience as an educator, researcher, author, and cultural change agent. She is also a TEDx and keynote speaker, and her work has been instrumental in shaping DEI initiatives across various sectors. I did many questions about her book, From Sabotage to Support, and went deeper into some big topics like the impact of the patriarchal system on how women are judged and sometimes sabotage each other in the workplace. So she explains what DEI really means and why it is so crucial in today's world. And we talk about the importance of intersectionality, how our different identities intersect to shape our experiences. So get ready to enjoy this episode full of insight and practical tips, and I know you will find it as enlightening and empowering as I did. So welcome one more time to the Brilliantly Branded podcast. So welcome to another episode of the Brilliantly Branded podcast. Here we are having conversations with our guests who are delivering learning and inspiration based on their experiences. So we all are unique, and having the opportunity to have a voice across the podcast and share as well our thoughts and the way how we are connecting emotionally with others, which is one of the main purpose of the branding as well. So have been bringing and empowering tools to make changes. Today, my guest, I'm happy to have her, is the Dr. Joy Wiggins. And she is a powerhouse in the field of diversity, equity, and inclusion. She is serving as a researcher, author, keynote speaker, and cultural change agent. So her work have been creating meaningful and systemic and sustainable change within organizations by fostering, of course, environments and inclusivity and belonging. So Dr. Wiggins, she will be talking about as well of a book, From Sabotage to Support. We are going to have more details later on because it's a very interesting topic related with feminist solidarity in the workplace that I think is one very important topic nowadays. So her expertise, of course, in navigating these conversations and making all those improvements into the society make her a perfect guest to be part of the Brilliantly Branded podcast. I just have to give you the warm welcome and asking you actually to please share with us a part of your background and part of your journey about how you become deeply involved in diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Sure. Hi. Thank you so much, Maria, for having me. I'm really excited to be here and excited to get to know you as well and to talk to your listeners. So when I think about how I got involved in DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion work, mostly it came from my family. Growing up, my dad was in the military and his father was in the military and my mother's father was in the military. So we were all quite transient as far as military. Sometimes you move every 2 or 3 years. So my dad lived in Japan as a child. My mom lived in Spain. And then by the time it came to us, we lived in Germany and we moved all over the US. And so part of that was this constant moving, constantly learning how to culturally navigate new contexts. And another part of that was looking at the cultures in which that were very different than ours. So for instance, my family traveled to Tunisia one time in Northern Africa when I was about 10 years old. And my mom spoke French. And while she was at the marketplace, a young Tunisian girl, asked her to come to lunch. So our whole family went to lunch. And I remember as a 10-year-old watching those, the sheets in their home with couscous drying on it.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, it's one of those most vivid memories. And I watched a little kitten walk across the sheets with the couscous on there, and just everything being so different. And watching the grandmother making some of what looks like tortillas, but I know it's not tortillas. I can't remember what it's called. And just looking at things like that, that made me then, as an adult, want to move to China. So I lived in China for a year. I traveled all over Asia. I went to Japan and I spent a month in Thailand. Last year I spent 6 weeks in Europe, just going to Croatia, Budapest, Prague, Berlin. Going back to Berlin was really interesting because we went through Checkpoint Charlie in
No.
the 80s as a child. And so that I even going to Berlin and going to Checkpoint Charlie last summer, remembering what that was like when, as a family, we were traveling over from West Berlin to East Berlin, and that fear that I had. And my dad was a pretty jovial man, and whenever he got serious, you knew that things were serious. So he turned around and said, "Be quiet, don't say anything as we cross over." And for us, I just remember the vast difference between East and West Berlin. And, just those small experiences that add up to a story of understanding cultural context a lot better, understanding how rich and diverse global experiences are and people that you meet. There's just so much richness in that. And so that was one thing that started my journey. The other thing that started it was being in college. So after being in Germany, we moved back to Texas, where our family is originally from. Texas being very, very different. San Antonio, Texas, very
I
different than
can
Frankfurt,
imagine.
Germany. So, as a child, I come back, I'm about fifth grade at this point, and for me, the girls look like old women. Like the way they were dressing, it was like in prairie dresses, and it was so bizarre. We were kind of punk in the 80s from Germany, and then my sisters and I quickly realized that what we were wearing was not going to fly where we were. So, I then lived in Texas for a while. We moved to Virginia really quickly. I met some friends there, but then back to Texas, and I went to college in Texas. Well, I went to Texas Tech, which is in the panhandle of Texas, and it's very agricultural. This is a huge agricultural university, and it's really out in the middle of nowhere. If you think about Texas and tumbleweeds and sandstorms, that's where we were.
Wow.
And so it's very quintessential Texas, right? So, but I remember I had a friend that moved from San Antonio up to Lubbock, and we were attending Texas Tech at the same time, and he is Black. And at that time in the early 90s, there were cotton plants being placed outside of the Black football players' dorm rooms. So that's hearkening back to plantation and picking cotton, Black people picking cotton during slavery. And I mean, that's a really horrible thing to do for them to experience. There was that. Then there was a fraternity ghetto party where the white fraternity members were wearing blackface. And so there was all of these really overtly racist things happening at the university. And was outside of my dorm room, or actually outside of the dorm where my friend lived, and I was dropping him off. And he said, "Listen, I have to leave. I can't stay here. I'm about to be killed. I know that I will not survive living here." And I just remember being, as a white woman, thinking, what? That's horrible that you even feel that way. And it really opened up a window into an experience I did not have. And this was my friend, that the fact that he was experiencing this in silence, and feeling like he had to physically move because he wasn't going to survive really impacted me. So I was majoring in education. And so I decided, I need to really understand outside of my own experience, because as a woman, I most certainly have had sexist experiences and misogyny, impact me, but I really wasn't having racism impact me. And so knowing that this was a very different experience, I wanted to dive more into it. So as I got my master's, I went into education, and then I went to China, lived there for a year, and then got my doctorate in multicultural education with an emphasis on like anthropology, cultural identity, critical legal studies, critical race theory. So all of the things that are now being attacked currently, this was back in the early 2000s. And so I've been doing this work for now 24 years
Wow.
around diversity, equity, inclusion. So that's kind of the trajectory of how it all started. But those small experiences that you have can really impact what what we see and don't see.
Well, the thing is that it's just you build your own roots. I mean, all the things, all those experiences have been letting on you something that you realize I need to solve in certain way, and got touched by those experiences really move you to the place that you are right now. And keep
Mm-hmm.
it that during the time is probably the most rewarding part, because some people see that these kind of things happen and they say, well, it's okay, it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Racist, all the situations that you can see, and especially when you are raised and you live those experiences. For example, the things that you have been seeing in other countries, other cultures, what happened in other country, how the people are living, and really
Yeah.
generate an impact on you. That is really something that brought you today where you are today. And well, for me, is incredible. And thank you for sharing that. Because this is not only the one thing that you have been done. I mean, all your background, your stories. I love the name of your book and the topic that is actually from sabotage to support. So I'm so curious to know what is this is about, and how you have been talking about women challenges, but especially, I don't know if you are talking about that specifically in the book, but if you can, like, bringing us to a little bit of the story behind that, that will be lovely. I'm so curious about that.
Sure, sure. Well, I co-authored it with Dr. Camille Anderson, and she and I met. Whenever we do interviews together, she and I talk about how we met. And we met in Madrid, Spain at an intercultural communication seminar. And both of us were professors. Both of us have an academic background. We're both actually the same age as well. So we kind of had those similar experiences of just kind of the shows we watched, the music we listened to. And Camille is black and I'm white. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about for sure was the history of the feminist movement. We wanted to talk about what that's like for black women and what that's like for white women and other women of color, and how there are different movements. There was the Asian American women movement. There's the Latina movement, especially we focused on the US. But we also have kind of a global context. And one of the things that we really think is important is for women, no matter where you are in the world, to know your history and to know how society got to where it is and the opportunities that you were given and the barriers that were set up for you as you navigate the workplace or even opportunities, education, the healthcare system, the political system, all of the different systems. So we felt like it was important to first start with our history and asking, our readers, look at your history, no matter where you are. When did women get the right to vote? Who set up the constitution of your government? Who set up the political system? Who set up the justice system, healthcare, education? All of those things, because that's going to dictate your everyday experiences. And those are then going to send you messages of how you navigate those systems. So whether that be, I'm going to the doctor, is the doctor listening to me? Do I have access to birth control, reproductive rights? The political system, especially in the US right now, whether or not American women have autonomy over our bodies. It depends on which state you live in. I live in Texas. I don't. We
Yeah,
don't
that is
have
true.
abortion's been outlawed, right?
Mm.
And we are being criminalized. Doctors are being criminalized. So, but if I go back to Washington State where I lived before, that's not the case. So it depends on where you are. It depends on time and space, what access you have to medical procedures, what access you have to education. We just had affirmative action was overturned at the Supreme Court level in the United States. So that means that higher education can no longer show diverse representation. They are trying to say it's the merit-based system,
Oh, wow.
where if you don't have access to a recruiter when you're in high school, and you don't have access to the different vocational and career opportunities at your current school because schools are based on property taxes. And if you live in a low income area, your school is not going to have as many resources. So it just repeats that cycle over and over again. And so if you're going to school, you don't see all the different opportunities of getting to college. There's not an appropriate college recruiter there. If there's no incentive for colleges now to have diverse representation, they're not going to go to those high schools anymore. They're not going to go and try to recruit diverse students. So then that leads into the talent pool. What's represented at the talent pool? Because if those students are not getting access to college, those students are not getting access to internships. They're not getting access to the talent pools that go up for corporate workplaces and for hiring and recruitment strategies. So that's a ripple effect. And so all of those things, understanding that history and understanding the structure of the systems within your country, within a global system, how different countries affect each other and the opportunities. The United States has had a huge impact on the way the Middle East has been set up, the countries in the Middle East. There's so many different avenues for understanding why the world is the way that it is currently. And the more we understand our history, the more we understand the impact of our country's interactions with other countries, the more we're going to become a better global citizen, more informed. So all that to say is that first chapter is really important. And of course, we can't cover all of that.
You already spoiled the book, the entire book. I mean,
that's just chapter 1. So, and we don't get into all of that. We can't, it's hard to get into all of that, but we ask the questions. And so then it gets into, the book starts with how does sabotage happen? And when we look at the differences between women across different intersecting identities. So I am a white woman. I'm going to be 40 next month. No, 40. I'm going to be 50. Sorry, not 40. No, actually, I'm fine with being 50.
That is okay, it's okay.
Yeah,
it's 10 less.
40. That's so funny. I'm going to be 50. But that, my age has a lot to do with it. There's age discrimination now. At first, when you're too young, you get one kind of age discrimination. As you get older, you get another. Then, I identify as a queer woman. So I'm part of the LGBTQI community. I am a single mom. I have ADHD. So when we think about intersecting identities, there's all these things that complete us as a unique individual. So we have all these different factors that shape us, who we are, how we see the world, the way we are seen, and the way we see others. So that's when we talk about intersectionality. That's what we're talking about. So that next piece of it is, especially for Camille and I, when we were writing the book, even there were times that we would go and present, like in Seattle. And as we're walking down the street, she said, okay, I want you to notice something. I want you to notice the looks that I'm getting as a Black woman. And so as I started to notice that, I was like, oh, wow. Yeah, we're being treated differently as we're walking down the street than I would if I was just by myself. My friend that is Japanese, she and I were walking down the street once at a conference, and somebody shouted out Lucy Liu to her, which is an Asian actress, which is, a huge stereotype. And for her, I was like, wow, this is another experience I don't have. I have other experiences, but I don't have those particular ones. I think too, being neurodivergent and the conversations nowadays around being neurodivergent, being part of the LGBTQI community, that is now, there's a lot of bills going forth in like Texas and in the southern states around banning, equal marriage. Just things like that are affecting me in different ways that maybe don't affect other people. So, all of that to say is that it's important for us to understand our intersecting identities and that we're each experiencing the world quite differently. So you might be at the workplace and not realize that your colleague who looks different than you is having a very different experience than you do and than what you're currently having. And the more you understand that, the better you're going to be able to support them. And so that's why the book goes from sabotage to support, because that sabotage is important to understand and to name it so that when there are microaggressions happening to your colleague, like if somebody were to say to my Black colleague that they're being angry, well, this idea of the stereotypical angry Black woman, I could better support my colleagues if I understand that trope, that stereotype that's been leveraged towards them and being used to attack them,
Yeah.
essentially. For me, being ADHD is difficult because I think very differently. So I have to be able to learn how to advocate better for myself when I want to communicate with somebody. Like I need directives. I need you to be really clear about some things, about the task, whatever it is, because typically ADHD people see the whole picture and it's hard for us to hone in on the details. So I already know that about myself because I've been doing that work. So the more you know about yourself and the more that you understand others and the experiences that our history has done to shape them, the better you're able to support them.
This is fantastic, especially because I have a lot of information that I am feeling very identified with. For example, the stereotypes. I'm
Mhm.
Colombian, so all the time, mostly people know me and say, "Ah, Colombia, Pablo Escobar, ah, cocaine." So I'm always like trying to say, "Well, okay, if this is what you think about this country, well,
Mhm.
thank you, but no, thank you." These kind of things have been happening to me, and as well, arriving in Luxembourg, we have a very multicultural environment, so we need to deal very well with that, because do you know who is next to you, working with you? And in terms of having this knowledge about how different cultures are behaving and understanding that is very important. So I think that your giving to the world and to the universe across this book, it's amazing, Joy. I have to congratulate you. And actually, I will invite all our listeners to buy the book. I'm going to leave the link on the comments.
This is
Well,
right.
you have it. I love it. I love it. It's so beautiful. Sometimes some guests doing the same, like, well, I was not prepared, but here you go.
Here it is.
Well, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure that I'm going to buy it. I'm going to dig in on the information, because it's key, knowing the history, knowing where the things are coming from, and actually
Mhm.
what is triggering all the cultures to do what they are doing. Is incredible. Another very interesting topic that I know that you wanted to talk about, that is about this patriarchal system. The patriarchal system, actually, that is the system that is influencing the way that we as a women are judged. So how we are including that in our daily life, especially in the workplace, and how have you been research about that, and your experience, or what you can tell us about this?
Yeah. Yeah, I think sometimes people don't really understand the patriarchal system, like what that means. So I'll kind of go back and kind of explain it. Like what you said, it's very much if you think about the questions: who built the environment, who built the culture of the company, who's the leadership, who created society, who, like, in the United States, who created our Constitution? It was all white men. They decided the rules of the country. And at that time, women had no say in that. They had no say in property ownership. They couldn't vote. And Black people as well could not vote. At a little bit later on, we had Asians being brought in from different Asian countries that were building the railroads on the West Coast. They were not able to bring in their spouses for, I think it was like almost 80 years, something like that. I might need to be corrected on that. Um, there's so many different experiences of who had a say in the formation of the government. We were also colonized.
Hmm.
So, it was not our land to begin with. It was the indigenous tribes' lands before we got here. So a lot of times when they say discovering America, that right there is not true.
Yeah.
So we also have to look at who was here first and what has happened on our land, this land that we are currently on, that was not ours to begin with. And also, what was the violence and the colonization that was happening at the time too? So all that history again is so important Because if we know that, then we start to understand that there's a reason why we need to have diverse representation. And so my cat has a tendency to, when I start to talk, to try to get up on my lap. So if that happens, you'll know
No
why.
worries.
Um,
He's welcome to the podcast as well.
yeah, she really like when I
As
start to
she.
talk.
Okay.
But when we look at like religious ideology, when we look at familial expectations, what's expected in the family, who is the head of the household, all of those things then are part of the patriarchal system. So who has power in the educational system? Who has power in the political system? Who is setting up investment? Like when we think about female founders, who's investing in women entrepreneurs? It's typically white men. So there's not going to be a lot of female founders being invested in, because sometimes men don't really understand the products that the women are trying to sell, right? That they need investment on. So right now I've just went to a group and to a movie called Show Her the Money. And it was all about female investors investing in female founders. And so even those types of things, providing the money
Hmm.
and the structure for women to thrive. If that's under a patriarchal system, it's going to be even harder for women to do that. So when that comes up in the workplace, one of the words that I think is really important to think about with the patriarchal system is the word matrix, or a matrixed um, structure. As far as like a lot of times when I've interviewed for corporate jobs and they say, well, we're a very matrixed organization. That's a very hierarchical organization. Somebody has power over somebody else. And one of the things that it's important to look at when you go into corporate culture is the organization structure, the matrix. And that right there should tell you it's going to be a patriarchal system.
Yeah.
So, when they say it's matrix, that means you are to report to somebody else. That person, then you have to make that person look good. Well, as we know, statistically speaking, McKinsey did a report on how women of color and women especially get stuck at those middle manager roles. A lot of times that's that glass ceiling. They don't go beyond that. They don't get to senior leadership C-suite roles. They certainly don't get to the board. And that's where all of those decisions get made of the structure of the organization. So women are not getting access to that. So we can't really change the structure and the matrix if we don't have access to change at those senior leadership roles. So they might go up a little bit, but the glass ceiling hits usually at those middle manager roles. So when we think about bias and how typically somebody that's at a senior leadership role, most of the time they're men, most of the time they're white men. There's a thing called affinity bias, where when we want to hire people that look like us, that act like us. That's just an inherent bias that humans do. It's a human condition. It's very common to do that.
Yes.
So that's also why you'll see affinity bias happening in those senior leadership roles. They go out for whiskey or happy hour or cigars and, golfing. All those things are when a lot of deals and networking are made. And that's where the CEOs have time to go take off that time, go to play golf for hours. A lot of times women can't do that. We don't have that time. If we still have the burden of the household chores or picking up the kids or, anything like that, we are not only are we burdened with the household stuff, we're doing all the extra work at home, that
Yeah.
shadow work. We're also doing this work. Sometimes we're doing side work at the office. We might be expected to do more of the parties and the cultural committees and things like
Yeah.
that. If we're part of an employee resource group, because we want to be a part of like the Women's Business Network or something like that, that's an additional burden on us, something
You
off the
just
side of your desk.
voice out something real. I mean, this is a fact. I haven't heard that, not just from you, I mean, from many people. But my question, and coming to your expertise, how do you think that we can start changing that? Because we are not controlling this patriarchal system. So, how we can, in certain ways, start to change that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that one of the best ways to do it is get your foot in the door, right? So how do we get our foot in the door? We have to kind of play the game. And one of the things that I wish I would have done really early on, and I can't stress this enough, is to get multiple mentors. So mentor, having like a career coach, having somebody within the organization that you are a part of, having them, someone that's a senior leader. And that might be another female, but it might also be a man that can help you navigate the corporate culture or navigate the culture of the organization, whatever it is. For me, it was academia early on, and then I went into corporate. Um, to have a mentor, somebody to help you understand the corporate culture, to understand the nature of that particular company is really important. To have another mentor that is that can help you navigate burnout, help you navigate what are some things that you should be doing at home and what are some things you could delegate, what are some things you should be doing at work and what are some things you could delegate there, how to have a conversation with your boss, how to establish a good communication pattern so that you have effective and efficient communication with your boss rather than trying to guess. Look for transparency, at home, with your spouse or with like for me, I'm a single mom. So I have transparency with my daughter. I have to be very clear about what I want her to do at home so that she can help me be an effective, efficient mom and employee and entrepreneur. So those are things like that. So getting multiple mentors for your career inside the organization and outside the organization. How do you have somebody that helps you learn how to network? How do you network efficiently? So joining organizations that are like, for me, I only have 3 that I do. And it's really easy to want to join a whole lot of organizations and do all the things. But I have 3 that I'm a part of. I'm a part of Austin Women in Technology, which is great for looking at networking around the technology industry. Also, the Austin Women Magazine, which is great for entrepreneurs. And then I do an FBI Citizens Academy where I'm a community liaison. So I have a community aspect. So those 3, I'm really strategic about being a part of those 3. I don't do anything else beyond that. I'm on the board of a couple of things, Austin Women in Tech and part of a university women in leadership program. But I make sure that I'm really efficient with my time around those.
Yeah.
So things like that. Also finding a sponsor at work, somebody that's actually not just a mentor, somebody that can give you advice, but a sponsor, someone that's going to advocate for you. So those are maybe 2 different people. You have a mentor that's going to help you understand corporate culture and maybe understand the matrix. And then you have a sponsor, somebody that's actually going to help you get those promotions, help you move beyond that middle manager glass ceiling. So that's important because those are all different things. Those are very different ways of navigating the workplace and
Yeah.
navigating what you are going to do on your career trajectory. So, a lot of that, like if the ERGs, one of the things that you asked about was employee resource groups. If you are going to be a part of an employee resource group and let's say you want to be a leader on it, make sure that that leadership position is actually going to help you with your promotions at work. Sometimes those actually nobody cares if you're on those. They're great for creating, affinity groups, getting people that are part of networking, helping allies. Like, let's say if men are a part of the women's, business group, make sure though that if you are going to be taking on a leadership position for that you're going to be supported from your manager, and that that's going to be seen as a plus when you go up for your annual review. That's important
Yeah.
because if
Yeah.
it's not, and if it's only taking away from what your day-to-day activities are and duties are, it might actually hurt you. So
Yeah.
I mean, like it's great if you can be a part of it, but if the organization's not seeing that as a benefit to them, you have to make the case for that.
Yeah.
So things like that is really important to make sure we understand about your particular organization. So having that mentor will help you decide, like, is this a good thing for me to do or not? What trainings should I do within the organization? How am I going to learn more about, like, am I following our company's podcast? Am
Mm.
I following our company's business line? Do I understand the industry really well? Things like that are all really important to make sure that you get your foot in the door and then you can blow that door wide open.
Yeah, I can imagine. And actually that's make me wondering about the small companies, because probably in a big corporate you have the access to find all those mentors and the team, you're the boss, the boss that is going to support you. But the thing in a small companies is probably how you really can find all those mentors, because all the situation are presenting as well in small companies, and how to create that environment, for example, to working better between women and men. I mean, there is something that you can advise, for example, related with that, how to get into this equal treatment between men and women.
Yeah, I would say, I think you're right. It really does depend on the size of the organization. So, but there's a lot of great external organizations that if you're not finding what you need within yours, there's a lot of great external ones. I would definitely suggest being a part of a local organization and being part of a national one, to vary it up. And also when you're on LinkedIn, to find mentors that way as well, and just be asking them like, hey, do you mind if I pick your brain about this? And be very clear about what you want to ask them so that you're not wasting their time. Um, I then think you can make, then I think you can make the case for men to better understand how to be an ally for women at work. You also have to learn how to communicate to them when a microaggression is occurring. So one of the things that I typically say is if you want to get more male allies, always assume positive intent. So I'll give you an example. I was a part of a DEI committee at a university that I was a professor at. And one of the men said to us, let me backtrack. We were all on this committee, and some of the women were saying, hey, we don't want to do another event because we feel like a lot of times when we do these events, the women are taking on more food things. We're making sure the food is there. We're making sure the little things, the tables, the pins are on the table, those little details that women typically think of. The men were more of the big picture. And they were thinking, well, let's just have another one. We need to have as many of these. They were a community event called Talkin' Race, and it was all about race and racism. And we thought, yeah, it's great. We'd love to have as many of those as possible, but we also still have our full-time jobs. And we also knew that there was going to be one woman that a lot of that burden was going to land on her. And we were being protective of her when we said we don't want to have another event. So it was becoming kind of a heated conversation in this meeting. And so I was the co-leader at the time. And I said, okay, I just want us to stop for a second, take a breath, and understand there's a division going on right now. And I want us to be very mindful of what that division is. There's women saying this and there's men saying this. I just want us to be cognizant of that.
Hmm.
And the men were like, look on their face. They did not understand. And I was like, the women definitely knew why there was a divide right there. So fast forward to another meeting later, and one of the guys didn't show up, and we wanted to have a real heart to heart about what had happened. One of the guys didn't show up. The other guy came, and he goes, well, you women were being so dramatic. And I could just see the anger coming up with the other women. And this was such a good lesson because this was such a visceral reaction that we all had. But I said, okay, so what you just said, that women are dramatic, let me tell you the history of that word, because you probably don't know. And I'm assuming you don't know. And the women right now in this room are not happy with that word. And I'll tell you why. Women have been relegated to mental institutions whenever they've been deemed to stand up for themselves. They've been called hysterical, dramatic, angry, over emotional. Those are trigger words for us to mean shut up, to stay in your place. And we've actually been physically harmed when we've been called dramatic or over emotional or angry. We've had experiences in mental institutions where women have been as extreme, as this is, lobotomized for speaking their mind. So when you say words like that, that has been used as against us. It's been
A
leveraged
trigger.
against us.
It's a
So
trigger.
we're going to be triggered. And he goes, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. I go, I know you didn't. And that's why I'm
Yeah.
telling you. So you have to understand the reason why we were being so upset about that or getting so upset was because we know that the overburden of domestic duties, like putting the food on the table, getting the pins for the table, all those little small logistical things, were going to overburden us. Those are compounded on us. And
Yeah.
he, and the light bulb went off. But now, had I said, hey, you're triggering us, you don't know what you're talking about, and had I, reacted that way, but I came at it from a very logical, kind of anthropological approach. And I just said, I know, and I assume positive intent. I know you don't know this. I have a feeling you don't know this, but let me give you the history behind it and why we might be angry at that kind of word or stereotype that you're leveraging towards us. And I think when we come at it from that direction, it can help us better communicate with men. And the other thing is when we talk about the patriarchal system, we might say, a lot of times in the patriarchal system, men also suffer under that. You're not having time with your kids. If you are getting the message that to be a man is to be the breadwinner, you have another compounded um, weight on you as well. Like I think about my own dad. He worked himself into the ground because, he was a military man. My mom really couldn't have a career because we moved so much. So it was really difficult for her to have a career. So she stayed at home with us. So not only did that hinder her in being financially independent. She wasn't. She was dependent on my dad. My dad then felt the burden of his three daughters and his wife and trying to make, his business work after he left the military, all the career things. My dad died when he was 56 of a stroke. And
Oh,
that came out of that stress and that high blood pressure and all of that burden. And, during the financial crisis of 2008, I was living in kind of an affluent area. I was on the outskirts. Let me just be clear. I was not in the affluent area. I was on the outskirts, but I knew a lot of people that were living in that area. And there was a high rate of suicide amongst the white men in that affluent neighborhood
yeah.
around the financial crisis. So, that right there shows us too that it's not benefiting either of us.
No.
Um, so why not, look at, break down some of these matrices? Why not start to look at a more even playing field for everybody rather than having it be men in power? Because it's not helping them. It's not helping the women. And the more we talk about it, about how this is affecting us as individuals and how this affects us as a society, we might be better off helping each other and doing and fulfilling the things that we want to do. So men can stay at home more with their kids and not be ostracized by other men for doing so. Things like that.
I love that. I love that, and I love the what you have been saying. I think is I have been learning a lot of things today from you. I have to say thank you because all this information is key to voice it out as you well did, and understand what is happening and understand that we have a reality in front of us, and we need to really understand how to manage that in certain way. So my, just to start to wrap up, my last question will be most related in how, based on those experiences, because you have been working on that for years, and how you can really advise women and men and people in the work environments how they can really navigate all these diverse situations that are coming to them related with what just the topic that we approached today.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is just self awareness. I keep talking about the history, understanding our history better. Self awareness, like, knowing that you see the world a particular way. The more that you dig deeply into reflecting on the way that you see the world and the way you navigate it, the opportunities you've been given, the barriers that have been set up for you, the more you're better able to understand somebody else's story. So the more reflective you are of your own and the more self-aware you are, the more you can be like, oh, I have this particular experience. What is yours like? And I know that I have, I experience the world this way. You probably experience it very differently. Let's have a conversation about that. And having it where it's not judgment free, because that's impossible, right? It's hard to have a judgment free, bias free. It's not humanly possible.
Yeah.
Human beings have to compartmentalize ththings. We have to label things and to understand our world. It's what we do. Um, So it's going to be impossible to be colorblind. It's going to be impossible to be judgment free or objective. It really is. We all, no matter what work we've done on ourselves, we still have biases. So if we can accept that about ourselves and understand what those are. And so something I had my students do as an assignment is I wanted them for a whole week to just observe their thoughts. And I used to call it the ticker tape. You know how, on newsreels and stuff, they have the running like stock market numbers underneath, like when you're watching the news. That's your brain just on autopilot, making up stuff, just all kinds of stuff going on, right? Things about ourselves, things about other people, all kinds of things just running through our minds all the time. So I wanted them to take that down and look at it. And what are some judgments that you're making that you weren't even aware of? Where did that come from? What's the story behind that judgment? Then that's that, developing that critical self-awareness. Then when somebody is telling you their story and they're saying, I'm feeling discriminated against, or I'm feeling a particular way, or I feel like I'm not being heard, you are better able to hear them because you've already done that work on yourself. So that's one way of that self-awareness, self-reflection. So when somebody's coming to you at work and they're having this particular experience, you're better able to hear them. You're better able to say, wow, tell me more about that. Asking them questions rather than telling them their experience, or rather than saying, oh, that's not happening, and being dismissive and gaslighting them.
Or judging them. Yeah, judging them because they are saying that. Yeah.
Right. And just saying, oh, they're being overreactive, or they're being dramatic. So you, instead of those things, be like, oh, well, tell me more about that. There's a lot of great intercultural communication techniques, conflict resolution techniques that you can do. But just to ask questions about it. So that's one thing. And then just be observant, like notice when there's a woman in a meeting that's being interrupted, or when somebody is interrupting somebody else more. You can always stand up and say, hey, listen, I'm sorry. I just want to go back to what so-and-so was saying. I think they had a really good point. I wanted to hear that. And you're not saying so-and-so shut up. You're just saying, I want to hear more of this. And so you're not, it's, what I mean? It's a little bit different. So, that's something else. Also really understanding the organizational structure of where you are and how to navigate it. And then having some transparency. So once you start to go up into the ranks, making sure that you're very clear about the transparency of the organization, so that the people behind you. So rather than being a queen bee woman, which is somebody that says, I suffered all these hardships, you're going to have to suffer the same hardships as me. Instead of doing that, that's not helpful. Instead, say, hey, listen, all you women that are coming up behind me, let me tell you the unspoken rules. Let me tell you the hidden rules that are going on and how to get to where I am. And I'm going to kick open that door a lot more for you so that you can navigate this and get up here faster, so that you can kick open the door and change the structure completely.
Yeah, so this is a completely different approach, definitely. And that will generate really impact, and a positive impact. That is what we are missing more. Well, so that is incredible. All the conversation that we just had. I have to thank you for being here and for all the value that you just delivered. So thank you very much for being here. And I hope to keep in the contact with you, because I think that you are delivering a lot of value.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I can't wait to have some offline conversations with you and learn more about you too, Maria.
Of course. Thank you very much. We hope you have been inspired by this content and join us for future episodes of the Brilliantly Branded podcast. We will continue exploring the power of branding and the stories behind successful brands. And remember, if you know a woman who has built a successful brand with a unique approach and a story to share, please refer them to our podcast. We would love to learn from their experiences and share their story with our listeners. Stay tuned for most episodes of Brilliantly Branded, and don't forget to follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, on our YouTube channel for more branding insights and women empowerment. Until the next episode, ciao ciao.